John 14, verses 1 through 7. John 14, verses 1 through 7. I'll be reading out of the New King James. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going, and how can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. And from now on you know him and have seen him.
Good morning, everyone. My heart is filled with so much joy for a lot of reasons this morning, several reasons, and some that are obvious and maybe some that are not quite so obvious. But first of all, it's always a joyful thing for both Vicki and myself that when we have our 3 children together and our 4 grandchildren together and all sitting on the same row together, getting along. No, they've done that for quite a while now. But that is just a terrific thing, just a wonderful thing. Also, my heart's filled with joy, and I appreciate, as Hoyt had stated within the prayer. I was wondering what cup you bring me from Mario, the Philippines. I had a little catch in my throat. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate that. But I appreciate what Hoyt said in the prayer. And I'm still riding on somewhat of a high because of the lectureship, of having those men with us, and I will go ahead and say young men because it's all quite relative, and with their families, and to be able to have the lectureship and to hear the sermons and to talk and have the good times that we did, not just in our time together in worship and hearing the lessons presented, but all of the other extracurricular things that we did as well. It just was a fantastic few days that went by so swiftly. But they've all arrived home okay, and David and Bailey, who were, of course, Connecticut got the brunt of this last week's storm, and they were supposed to go home Tuesday, and they did not make it home until Thursday, much to the happiness of Dennis and Sharon. But so they stayed a couple of extra days, but they're home just fine now, and we're very appreciative of that. And also, and I wouldn't do this very often, and especially for guests, but there's a particular young man here this morning with his fiancee, but David Johnson and Jessica. And David is a young man that I coached football many, many years ago at Morro Bay High School. And terrific young men and a great group of fellas in those years. Really appreciate that. But what I think of David often, and we have done some work in our home this last week, and in fact, as Bryce and Justin and Trevor and Tim and others have helped move, but one of the things in moving, there's a Bible that I have and a shelf of Bibles and books, and it was a Bible that was given to me by David and a couple of other players at the time in appreciation of coaching. And it's not too often that football players give a football coach a Bible as a gift. And I've always, I think of you often because of that, and it's great to have you here with us today. This ends up being our 7th installment of doing this series of The Great I Am, Jesus, in our study out of the Gospel of John. And I want us to understand as we think about this, and Jesus dealing with his disciples at this time, and again, Jesus had told his disciples, even the original apostles, where he was going, but they never seemed to understand when he said those words to them in his ministry. Earlier he had said to them, as we could read in John chapter 7 and at verse 33, Jesus said to the disciples that I shall be with you a little while longer, and then I go to him who sent me. You want to know something? They just didn't get it. They just didn't get it. And even less did they understand the way by which he was going, for that was the way of the cross, even as we have sung on that hymn, that song just a couple of moments ago. And by the way, an interesting side note to that, and I shared this with Clint earlier this morning, that song, The Way of the Cross, was a song that was taught to me when I was 12 years old by my father-in-law. He was not my father-in-law at the time. But when I was 12 years old, Paul Fields taught me how to lead that song, and that was 50 years ago. So do the math, and yes, you're right, Vicky is 62 years old. Now, but this was a truth that they would rather ignore. I want you to try to put yourself into the place of the disciples. They loved their master. They trusted him. They depended upon him. And when he would share words with them that he is going to go away, these are words they did not want to entertain. These are words of which they wanted to ignore. And furthermore, that not only was he going to go away, but he had already predicted and told them at times that it was going to be a gruesome way by which he would have to go in his suffering and dying a death on the cross. They weren't bad men. They loved Jesus. They're just selfish in their way, as we all are. When there's somebody that we really love and we're connected to, and we find out they're going to move for selfish reasons, we say, I don't like that decision. You've got to try to have some sympathy or perhaps even empathy with the disciples at this time. You see, at this point, the disciples, they were bewildered men. But there was one man among them who could never say that he understood what he did not understand. And you know who that was? Thomas. My middle name is Thomas. My grandson's middle name, Finn, is Thomas. Finn Thomas Willey. And I've been referred to as Doubting Thomas before. And what did well, Watkins. I said Willey. I did it again. Watkins. But when we look at Thomas, and how many times have we referred to him as Doubting Thomas? But here's the thing that really impresses me about Thomas in a couple of his situations. You see, he was far too honest and far too earnest or serious to be satisfied what appeared to be vague to him. You see, this whole matter of Jesus saying that I'm going away, he didn't get it. It was vague. And he wasn't just going to sit back and kind of just accept it. He's basically going to ask, why? What do you mean? How is this going to be? I tell you, that's something we ought to appreciate. And something maybe we ought to incorporate more often into our own lives at this time. Thomas had to be sure. So he expressed his doubt. He expressed his failure to understand. And the wonderful thing is that it was the question of a doubting disciple that provoked one of the greatest things Jesus ever said. Listen. No one needs to be ashamed of his or her doubts. For it is amazingly true that the one who doubts but seeks will find it in the end. Jesus has promised that to us. And so what does Jesus do? He responds to Thomas by saying these wonderful words that most of you have been able to quote for a long, long time. And Jesus says to Thomas, and ostensibly the other disciples present as well, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You see, Jesus took three of the basic conceptions of the Jewish religion. They often spoke, as we're going to see in the prophecies of the Old Testament, they often spoke of the way, the truth, and the life. And Jesus takes these basic concepts and he makes this incredible claim that in him, in Jesus Christ, all three are found and find their full realization. So I think that it's important that we look closer at this remarkable I am statement of Jesus, Jesus as the great I am. And when he responds to Thomas, who is this Lord? Show us the way. And all of these questions that would be going through their minds, Jesus resolutely and emphatically begins by saying, I am the way. Now, what we're going to see in all three of these, by the way, is the definiteness of it. A definite article. He just didn't say, I am a way. He says, I am the way. Do you see how definite that is? The Jews spoke much about the way, especially the way in which men must walk in the ways of God. We would find, for example, in some of the old law, in the record that we have, the account of Moses and the children of Israel. In Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 32, there it is proclaimed to the children of Israel of old, therefore you shall be careful to do as the Lord your God has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or the left. You shall walk in all of the ways which the Lord your God has commanded you, that you may live and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. We see in that principle that God prescribes the ways. Don't turn to the left, don't turn to the right, don't go off the path, follow the ways. They understood that principle. In Deuteronomy chapter 31 and at verse 29, for I know, and this is one of Moses' farewell addresses to the children of Israel shortly before he died, for I know that after my death you will become utterly corrupt and turn aside from the way. How sad is that? You will turn aside from the way which I have commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days, because you will do evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. You see, at the beginning of Deuteronomy, here's what they're saying. We're not going to go to the left or the right. They said, we'll do that. And yet, by the end of the life of Moses, what they've done, gone another way. Warnings are given constantly. We would turn our attention and focus upon the prophet, the great prophet Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 30 and verse 21, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. Whenever you turn to the right hand or whenever you turn to the left. You see, pursue that path. Keep the way. In Isaiah chapter 35 and verse 8, beautiful, beautiful passage. But in verse 8, a highway shall be there, and a road, and it shall be called the highway of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for others. Whoever walks the road, although a fool, shall not go astray. You see, God gives us a way, and he gives a path. He always has. And that if we'll just remain focused on him, it is a path we can pursue. We can do it. But if we become lazy, if we become too self-centered, then we will find ourselves going off the path. What we have when we look at these kinds of passages is that through the law, even the old law, the Jews knew much about God's ways. But these were ways that they sadly, habitually violated. That's also brought out in the book of Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 59, and there God says to the prophet, behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, nor is his ear heavy that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have separated you from your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you so that he will not hear. The problem is that when we forget about that way, and when we get caught up in sins and iniquities, that's when there becomes a separation in the relationship that man should have with God. But then here is Jesus saying, these Jewish disciples that know their own history, the history of Israel, know what the prophets had said, know what the right thing to do is really, to try to live a right life before God, but yet they struggled with that, just as people today struggle with it. But then here is Jesus saying, I am the way. What does he mean by that? He says, I am the way. My friends and brethren, he is saying that we are lost and we need directions. That's what he's saying. Have you ever been so lost that you felt completely helpless? I'll tell you, in some of our travels that we've had all over the country, and one particular time, not too many years ago, just a few years back, and we're driving into New York City, we're driving into Manhattan, and we were so, I'm going to tell you, the GPS was lost. That which we're trying to depend upon. And I figured out the problem, that there were just too many roads close together. It did not know what to do. And I couldn't tell what was north or south or east or west or up or down practically. And you feel so lost. A lot of us have been in those kinds of situations before, particularly in cities that we're not familiar with, in areas that we just don't know. Now, we know that sometimes that some kind soul gives us directions, and that's nice. Not always that helpful. Travel in the New England states, like Connecticut, and say, how do you get to such and such? And they say, well, you go here a piece and you turn right where the red barn used to be. thanks. I mean, it's just like it's no help at all. But maybe somebody will give you, and they'll give you some direction. But what about the person that says, come on, I'll take you there? That you're traveling, you're going, and you say, I'm lost, I don't know where to go. No, that's okay. Listen, follow me, I'll take you there. You know what? In that case, to us, that person to us is the way, and we cannot miss it. Do we understand what Jesus is doing? That's what Jesus does for us. Jesus does more than just tell us about the way. He says, come and I will take you there. He does not only give us advice and directions, that in so many ways, spiritually speaking, Jesus takes us by the hand and He leads us and He strengthens us and He guides us and He does this personally every day through His Word, does He not? Jesus says, I am the way. He does not merely tell us about the way. My friends, He is the way. The Apostle Paul would note in the New Testament in Ephesians chapter 2 and in verse 18, speaking of Jesus Christ, he says, for through Him we have both access by one Spirit to the Father. Listen, if we want to know the way to the Father in heaven, Jesus is that access. Yes, He says that I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. He is the access. When Jesus said that I am the way, He will take us there. Do you believe that? Do you trust that? Are you willing to extend your hand to Him and allow Him to take you there? But yet that's not all He says. Then next Jesus says that I am the truth. Yes, that I am the way. He says that I am the truth. Again, going back to the Old Testament, the psalmist had stated the beautiful 86th Psalm in verse number 11. And there he proclaims, teach me your way, O Lord. I will walk in your truth. Listen to it again. He says, teach me your way. I will walk in your truth. Now just think about that for a moment. Then later on in the Psalms, David had recorded in Psalm 119 and at verse number 30, I have chosen the way of truth. Do you see the correlation between the way and the truth? It's very evident. Here's Jesus saying, I'm the way. He's saying, I'm the truth. And how many times do we see within the Old Testament even, particularly the Psalms, that the way and the truth are put together, that they have that relationship? You know, many people, many men historically, many men have told us the truth, but no man has ever embodied it. Not Abraham, not Moses, not Samuel, not even John the Baptist, of whom Jesus said, of prophets born of women, there was none greater. Were these men that told others about the truth? Yes, but who embodied the truth? Remember when Jesus was standing before Pilate, very late in his ministry, had been arrested. He's going to soon be tried, convicted, and crucified. But you find the account in John chapter 18, and Pilate had asked the question of Jesus, what? What is truth? Remember that question? What is truth? I wish more people were asking that question genuinely and sincerely today. With open Bibles, what is truth? Do you remember why Pilate asked that question? It takes us back to the context of John chapter 18, and it was the preceding verse. It was verse 38, he said, well, what is truth? But in verse 37, Pilate had therefore said to him, that is to Jesus, are you then a king then? Because there were those that were saying, well, he's arrested because he claims to be king, and there's only one king, there's only one ruler, and that's Caesar. And can you imagine Jewish leaders acknowledging that Caesar's the guy? We know that they just wanted to put an end to Jesus. So Pilate asked Jesus the question, are you a king then? Jesus answered, you say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come to the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Now that's something that we see that Pilate, a Roman governor, had to wrap his head around. You see, Jesus says to him very emphatically, everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. And that's what causes Pilate to ask, well, what is truth? Now, as Bryce dealt in the talk and preparing our minds for the Lord's Supper, and especially going to the prayer of Jesus in John 17, And Jesus makes that statement in John 17:17, sanctify them in your truth. Your word is truth. Remember that in the prayer to the Father. But here's Jesus saying, I am truth, and he links it to the Word of God. And no wonder that Jesus is identified as the Word personified in John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's Jesus Christ. And so when Jesus says that I am the truth, we've got to appreciate and understand that truth is centered in the person and the teaching and the existence of the eternal existence of Jesus Christ himself. Again, many men have told us the truth, but no man ever embodied it except Jesus. That is, for he said, and that is exactly why he said, I am the truth. Now hear me on this before we go to our next point. There is an interesting fact about moral truth. Now think about this, that a man's character does not really affect his ability to teach a variety of subjects, such as geometry or biology or even Greek verbs. If somebody wants to teach him, are there those that perhaps are great teachers of chemistry, biology, science, mathematics, other kinds of subjects, languages, that are fantastic in teaching those subjects that may not be very good moral people? Well, that's a real strong possibility. But if a man proposes to teach moral truth, that is spiritual values, his character makes all the difference in the world. An adulterer who teaches the necessity of purity, a greedy man who teaches the value of generosity, a very domineering individual who teaches the greatness of the splendor of humility, an irascible creature who teaches the beauty of peace and serenity, and an embittered person who teaches the beauty of love is bound to be ineffectual, even a hypocrite. That's the thing about teaching moral truth. Tell me, who could teach the truth, moral truth, spiritual truth, all truth like Jesus? Nobody. And I'll tell you why. Because not only did he know the truth, he said, I am the truth. He embodied it. This is quite a declaration when he says, I am the way. There's one way to the Father. I am the truth because of this embodiment of truth. You see, moral truth cannot be conveyed solely in words. It must be conveyed in example. And that is precisely where even the greatest mortal teacher among men must fall down at his own imperfection. You know, we may be good teachers and preachers, and I think in this congregation we have some people that are great teachers, but you know what? We're very imperfect, aren't we? So we try our best, and we need to try our best. And we certainly don't want to be hypocrites. But here is Jesus Christ who embodies the truth. No teacher has ever embodied the moral truth he taught except Jesus. Many could say, I've taught you the truth, but only Jesus could say, I am the truth. And the tremendous thing, listen, the tremendous thing about Jesus is not simply that the statement of moral perfection finds its peak in him. It is that the fact of moral perfection finds its realization in him. No wonder in John 1:14, it says, and the Word, that is Jesus, became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of what? Grace and truth. Why later on in the same chapter of John 1 and verse 17, there he writes, for the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. The great I am says, I am the way, because he will take us there. And he says that I am the truth because he, like no other, embodies truth. And finally, he says in this wonderful declaration, he says, I am the life. I am the life. Proverbial wisdom had declared long, long ago in the sound, wise words of Solomon, for example. But in Proverbs chapter 6 and at verse number 23, Solomon has written, for the commandment is a lamp, and the law a light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life. May we never forget why God gives us his word. why he gives us laws, why he gives us commandments. I know we live in a time in society today that people want to kind of reduce Christianity to some kind of convenient religion, convenient Christianity. You know, just kind of accept Jesus as your personal Savior, be a believer in God. Yeah, basically be a good moral person, but really are not interested in knowing about the ways of God, the laws of God, the commandments of God, as though we really have no responsibility to that. Why would Jesus say then in John 14:15, if you love me, what? Keep my commandments. Why would John the Apostle write in 1 John chapter 5 and verse 3, for this is the love of God. This is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. And his commandments are not grievous, that is too burdensome to be able to keep. Now we see this correlation again. Again, we go to the proverbial wisdom. And in Proverbs chapter 10 and at verse 17, he who heeds instruction is on the path to life. I was teaching in class last week with a couple of people, and I was making the point. The thing about the Proverbs, in the book of Proverbs, is that the proverbial statements, that they transcend all laws and dispensations. They were true principles even before they were stated during the patriarchal time. They were certainly principles that were true when Solomon spoke them during the Mosaic time. And they are in so many ways, they are principles of truth even today. That's what's so beautiful about the Proverbs. And in the Psalms, David himself had said in Psalm 16 and verse 11, very much like his son Solomon had said, but in Psalm 16:11 he says, you have made known to me the path of life. Now again, when we look at these statements, we see this correlation again of what? Of the way, the truth, and the life. Those three basic principles of the Jewish faith. Jesus knew that. He seized upon that. He used that to teach this important lesson to the disciples then. And listen, please, to us as disciples today. We've got to get that. The faithful of old recognized that God was both the giver and the sustainer of life. And how often do we see in the Jewish history, the history of the children of Israel, they depended on him, but they often disobeyed him. Even the very best of them. I think about great men like Moses, great men like David. Did they make mistakes? And are there times that they took their attention off of God and off of his ways, and in their self-centeredness, we know what happened. We've got to learn by those lessons. But then we come back to Jesus, and here's Jesus, and he comes along and says, I am the life. Yes, he says that I am the way, and he's willing to take us there, and I'm the truth, and he embodies that truth. But now he says, I am the life. The inherent truth is that Jesus, as the Word, made life, all life. Everything that has life and breath within it is because the good Lord made it that way. What does it say in John 1:3? Remember John 1:3. In John 1:1, again, I quoted that a moment ago, but in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and he was in the beginning with God, and all things were made by him, in verse 3, and all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Who's the Word? The Word that was made flesh? Jesus Christ. The maker, the creator of all things. No wonder Jesus says that I am the life. But yet, inasmuch as he talks about making life, and even if it's the life of human beings or the life of the animate world, the life of the flowers and the trees that exist, life in so many different ways. In the final analysis, I believe the life he's really talking about, as we're going to see, is eternal life. You see, we're seeking life. I think this is why he says it. In so many ways, we are seeking life, and even the extension of it if possible. Aren't we trying to do everything we possibly can to avoid the inevitable? I mean, there was a time that I thought that if you turn 40, death lurks. And then I went past 50, and now I've gone past 60, and yet there's just this natural thing in us that we what? Seek life. We do everything we possibly can to extend it. Now, there's a lot of ways in which we try to do that. Man's quest for knowledge, his desire for fulfillment in life, for pleasure, for acceptance, is in fact his quest for a life that is worth living. Because in the end, you know what life is? Temporary. It is, as James says in James 4:14, that is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. And so, what I want us to understand as we bring this to a conclusion is that living for this life only is the most futile thing imaginable. I think it's wonderful that we make plans, and we have some that are here that are in education, you're going to college. We have some here, and not just this couple that I've talked about earlier, that are looking at beginning their life together as husband and wife, and we have others that are making plans and plans for family, and that's all a wonderful thing. But I want us to understand, listen please, that if living life is only living life for this life because of our job and our finances and our marriage and our children and so forth, and not teaching our children and not reminding ourselves that, listen, there's going to be something beyond the grave, on the other side, if you will. This is the life that Jesus is referring to when he says that I am the life. You see, remember how Solomon put it in Ecclesiastes 3:11? When you look at humanity and the creation of humanity, you know what God has put into our hearts? Eternity. I love that text. In Ecclesiastes 3:11, the wise man said he has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. We think we are so smart. Boy, we've really got it figured out, don't we? I'll tell you the only thing we need to figure out, and that is Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. The bottom line, the final analysis of this, listen to me, is that we are to fear God, to keep his commandments, get into a right relationship with God, that we might have access to the Father through whom? Jesus Christ. And there's only way that you can do that. And that's in compliance and obedience to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Wealth and worldly endeavor of any kind cannot secure life eternal. Only Jesus can do that. When Jesus said that I am the life, primarily again he is referring to eternal life. My friends, it was love that took Jesus to the cross. He died that we might have life. And as he said in John 10:10, that we might have life even more abundantly. Think of this, because it's just so true when you're really in love. And I can say this without embarrassment or apology whatsoever. Vicki and I believe that we're very much in love. And I know even as I go back to young love, we've been married for 42 and a half years, and we've been together since we were, little kids. But when you find out you have that love, and one might even say, I never knew what life was until I met you. I mean, don't you love hearing those kinds of things, babe? Oh, yeah. I never knew what love was until I met you. Because you know what love can do? It brings life. Love had brought life. But listen, I'm not talking about the love between Brent and Vicki. I'm talking about the love that Jesus brings. That's exactly what Jesus did. Life with Jesus is truly life indeed. Do you have that? Do you have it? I hope we'll never read this I am statement that I am the way, the truth, the life ever again without giving pause to the depth to which Jesus intended in those expressions. And so Jesus did say it resolutely, emphatically, that I am the way, the truth, and the life, and then leads to the profound conclusion, no one comes to the Father except through me. Remember last week when a couple of the speakers made the point, the very good point of Hebrews 11:6, that without faith it is impossible to please him? It's impossible. Nobody's going to accidentally please God. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. Again, of how emphatic that is, it's pedantic. I want to tell you, it's unchangeable. Well, what Jesus says here, when he says, no one comes to the Father except through me. There's no way we can get to the Father except through Jesus Christ, because he alone is the way to God. And in him alone we see what God is like. And he alone can lead souls into God's presence without fear and without shame. You know what I got to say about this, Thomas? What a great question. I'm so glad Thomas asked the question that he did. Even though he doubted and was not sure, he sure wanted to know, and so should we. Do you have it? Can we help you? Can we sit down and study? Can we open our scriptures together? Hear the invitation of Jesus. He wants you to come. And if we can help you in any way, if you know what you need to do and you're ready to confess your faith based upon the repentance of your past sins, you can be buried in the waters of baptism, no doubt about it. But if you're still trying to process these things, we want to help you. We want to help navigate with God's word in hand. If we can assist you in any way, please let us know. Won't you come forward at this time as we stand, as we sing the song that has been selected.
Hear the sweet voice of Jesus say,